Hi everyone and welcome back to the channel, and hi if you're new here, I'm Jade, and today I have a very specific question to be answered. Can any books really capture the essence of Labyrinth? So Labyrinth is my favourite movie of all time. I first watched it when I was 3 years old and it has just stuck with me over the time. I have a Labyrinth photo on my wall. I have a Labyrinth music box. I just love everything to do with that movie. And there are a lot of books that advertise themselves as retellings inspired by, and I'm just kind of intrigued to see if any of them can really capture that attention, capture that Jareth energy that the Labyrinth has. So I have planned to read 4 books. The first one is just the novelization of Labyrinth. So of course this one is definitely going to capture the essence of the Labyrinth, but I want to start with this because it's been quite a few years since I have read it, and it did originally come out around the time of the movie. It was the official novelization version of the movie, but obviously it's written based upon the movie. So I know that it follows the general idea. And from what I remember, this was quite a fun read. I really enjoyed it. So yeah, I just decided it would be really effective to start with this to kind of, I'm going to say, refresh my memory. I don't really need that. I know the story of the Labyrinth inside out. I don't know how many hundreds of times I have watched that movie, but it's a lot. But I also just thought a lot of people probably haven't actually picked up the novelization, so I can tell you whether it's worth reading, and then we can move on to books inspired by the Labyrinth and see if any of them really capture it. So once we have read this one, my other 3 that I'm going to read are Until the World Falls Down by Jordan Lynde. If you're a big Labyrinth fan, you're going to know where this title is coming from. It's a bit of a play on words from As the World Falls Down, the famous David Bowie song from the movie. Jordan Lynde themselves advertises this as inspired by the Labyrinth, and I think it's often said Labyrinth meets Beauty and the Beast. So this is going to be a very interesting one. This has been on my radar for a long time, and I picked it up quite recently in a haul, if you saw it, so I'm excited to get to this one. And the other 2 books that I have got digitally, and the first one is The Departed by Sommer. It even calls itself a Labyrinth retelling. So I am very intrigued to see how close this is to the original, because obviously they don't want to do copyright, and you do want some uniqueness in the story. So I'm very intrigued by this one, as it literally writes it on the front that it is a retelling. And the 4th and final book I'm going to read is Fear Me, Love Me by Lilith, Vincent. Of course, a famous line of Jareth from the movie, so I'm definitely intrigued to see how this one is inspired by the Labyrinth. Now, I do already know that this is very much its own story. I believe this is kind of like a mafia type book. So for me, I'm struggling to kind of envision how this is going to play out and feel like the Labyrinth, but it is advertised as being something inspired by it. So I feel like this is going to be an interesting one. So they are my planned reads to see if I can find the sort of perfect Labyrinth retelling slash vibe story, because as I said, I adore the movie so much and I love my fantasy novels, so I feel like this is going to be a really fun idea just to go through and see if anything makes me fall in love with it quite as much as the Labyrinth movie does. Honestly, I doubt it, because I love that movie so much. So like I said, I am going to start with just the general novelization. So obviously, yes, this is going to capture the essence of the Labyrinth, but I want to see if I love it just as much as the movie, whether I think it's worth, recommending to you, because it's been so long since I last read it, and I will share my thoughts on it. So let's get cracking with this one. This isn't very long. I think this is only about 200 pages or so. It's not that long a book. So I'm sure I will get this done very quickly, and then I will jump back in and share with you my thoughts. I don't know if I'm going to get all of it read right now, but I am going to read a little bit just so I can kind of share my initial thoughts with you before we move further into this video. Okay, I have read the first 4 chapters of the book, which is about 60 pages through out of the 200. It doesn't look as far through because the actual back of the book is kind of like notes and things from, I think, the Hensons and everything like that. So it's all just like relevant little notes, which are kind of cool to look at. So if you ever pick up a copy of the book, of this version, that's going to be in there, which is cool. I think it is like a special edition. It says like celebrating 30 years on this one. And it says with material from the Jim Henson archives. So this was kind of interesting, little additional thing. And yes, so far I'm really enjoying it. I do think it really sticks generally to the movie. Obviously there's like the odd extra line, or it's like rephrased slightly. I don't really know why, because I assume it's not really like a copyright issue here, because obviously this is a novelization of the movie, but for whatever reason they've changed it around a bit. A little part of me is just like on some of it, because for example, I think when Sarah meets Jareth, she says something like, "You're him, aren't you? You're the king of the goblins," I think is how she phrases it. She says king of the goblins in the book instead of the Goblin King, like in the movie. And I just know the movie so inside out that I'm gonna see all of these differences. But if you don't know the movie as well as me, maybe you wouldn't pick up on that. But it doesn't detract from the love of the story. Like, I'm really enjoying it. I will say, if I hadn't seen the movie, I don't know if I'd love this as much. Like, I'm loving it because I just love that world so much, and I just love being lost in it in whatever format. But maybe if I hadn't seen the movie, this wouldn't feel as good and as intriguing and as magical. But I think for someone who already loves Labyrinth, this is well worth a read based on the beginning. I've got a bit more to go. Once I have finished this, I will come back and give you feedback, and then we will move to the first sort of inspired by book. But hopefully, if you are here with me, you love Labyrinth just as much as I do, or you're just very, very intrigued by the story and the kind of fantasy telling of it. And I will say, if you have not seen the movie and you love fantasies, go and watch it. Honestly, it is so, so, so good. I will say, my husband watched it as an adult. He'd never seen it as a child, and he thought it was a little trippy. But for me, I just love it. I love Jareth so much. And I was actually talking to one of my clients about Labyrinth because of the picture on my wall. And she was like, yeah, when I was younger, I just wanted to marry David Bowie. Totally agree with her. Hi, good morning, everyone. I did actually finish last night the Labyrinth book. So as I said, I wanted to just sort of start out with that, have a refresher of how this one felt before I then go into books that are like the story, even though I am kind of really referring to the movie, obviously, in terms of vibes. I've got to say, I really, really enjoyed reading this because I love the story so much, and I'm so invested in all the characters of Labyrinth. Like, I feel like anything Labyrinth just pulls me straight in. However, what I will say is I rated this 5 stars the last time I read it, because I checked on my Goodreads. However, I have put it down to a 4.5. The only reason being is because I'm trying to be a little bit more objective with it. I love it. I have a great time reading it because of how much I love the story. But I think if anyone was to pick this book up, you know, and have not seen the movie, I honestly don't think it would be that great. So I've tried to be a little bit more objective and give it the 4.5. But obviously, I think for someone who hasn't watched the movie, I don't think they'd rate it anywhere near a 4.5. I think it would be a lot lower. And I think that's because all of the sort of imagination is really coming from my brain. I don't think there's like much description in here. And I think if I just came into this world and not having seen the movie, I wouldn't even know where to start with picturing it. Also, there is a little bit of a lack of Jareth and about him in here. So I feel like, you know, without the movie, again, he'd be a lot harder to imagine. And I don't feel like you really feel chemistry between Jareth and Sarah in the book. So I think it's a little bit of a different vibe. Whereas I think if you come in knowing the movie, you kind of just enjoy this and you read it for what it is, and you just kind of picture everything and imagine it how it was in the movie anyway. So if you are watching this and you haven't seen the movie, I really, really would recommend watching the movie first before you ever consider picking up the novelization. Overall, I think it's a really good sort of novelization because it does generally follow the story. There's a couple of like extra little scenes and things in here, and obviously we are in Sarah's mind here, so there's a little bit more of her sort of inner psyche going on, a few of her thoughts, and some of the lines are a bit changed or added to. And of course, because we don't have songs in the book, there are a lot of like dialogue additions to sort of cover those parts of the story. And I especially feel like the part with the fieries, I feel like that's quite different in the book. It has a very different vibe. It does talk about like removing their heads and things, but it's just not as fun as in the movie. It's just a little bit strange, I guess, in the book. And again, it's a scene that I would not be able to imagine at all had I not seen the movie. But it's a good fun time, and if you are a huge Labyrinth fan and haven't read it, I would highly recommend you just go and enjoy this one. And of course, now it is time to sort of dive into the main purpose of this video, which is finding books with a Labyrinth vibe that I kind of hopefully love the story just as much as I love the movie of Labyrinth. So I am going to start with Until the World Falls Down by Lynde, because this is the sort of first book that really inspired me to do this. I know a lot of other books based upon the Labyrinth are actually older than this one, but this one had just sort of come stumbling into my direction. I had seen this around on TikTok, probably because I get a lot of Labyrinth themed TikToks come up. And so as this is the book that sort of inspired me to look up other sort of Labyrinth retellings or inspired by Labyrinth books, I feel like it's fair that we start with this one. So I'm going to get started on this today. A book this length, because obviously I'm doing it around work and everything. It is my day off today, but I'm assuming it's going to take me 2 to 3 days, maybe 4, depending on this book. And then we've got the other 2. So honestly, I feel like it's going to take me probably over a week to sort of film this, maybe about a week. But yeah, we will see. I'm really intrigued to see what this one is, and I will just talk about the plot, I think, once I've read it, because then I can give you a much more concise idea. I feel like just reading the blurb isn't the most useful. So I'm going to get ahead and read this, and once I've finished, I will check back in with you and let you know what I think. Okay, everyone, I'm just sat over on a stool next to my bookshelves because I'm recording at that perfect time of day where there is no daylight and my usual sofa spot is just way too dark to film in. And I've had a busy working day, but I needed to stop by and discuss this while it's fresh in my mind. So as you know, Until the World Falls Down by Lynde is the first sort of Labyrinth-inspired book I decided to pick up. Honestly, it was the one I was most excited for. I had just sort of seen this posted around. Obviously, the title draws me in, Until the World Falls Down, you know, as the world falls down. It's very similar, so I was super excited, and it literally says on the back, Labyrinth meets Beauty and the Beast. It does call it a sexy romantasy, so I was expecting some spice and it to be a little bit more adult, which I have no issues with. However, this was way too much. So let me start by telling you roughly what the story is about. We follow a girl called Nell, and it turns out her boyfriend has been cheating on her with her sister. So naturally, she's quite distraught, and she heads off to a bar to sort of drown her sorrows. But while there, this mysterious man turns up who's just kind of good looking and basically invites her back. She goes with him, which is kind of out of character for her, but she says she kind of feels this like draw to him. She goes back with him. They have this sort of night of passionate love, and he says, oh, you're gonna stay with me forever, won't you? And she's kind of like, yeah, you know, not really taking things seriously or thinking about it. Then the next morning she goes to leave and he's like, no, you promised you were gonna stay with me. And she's like, no, I need to go home. I need to go back to my life, understandably. And basically he's like, well, the only way you can do that is you have to take on my labyrinth. And basically the caveat is not many people have ever completed the labyrinth. I think we find out there's 2 people before that have completed it. And if she fails, she's still there stuck with him. So she's either going to fail and be stuck with him in the labyrinth forever, or she chooses to stay there forever, or she really has to actually succeed so she can go home. So of course she tries to take on his labyrinth, and his labyrinth is formed very different from the actual like story of Labyrinth, which I really appreciate. Obviously, I didn't want like a carbon copy. I just wanted to get the vibes. And essentially, the labyrinth for her turns out to be that she gets sent to other people that are in the labyrinth, and it's like her task to help them solve their version of the labyrinth. And while she's going around doing this, we find out that our sort of labyrinth king called Enver actually doesn't have a heart. He has been cursed, and therefore he can't really feel many emotions. And therefore the story is about her trying to solve the labyrinth, but also falling for this heartless man at the same time. So honestly, I thought the concept was really, really strong. I liked the idea, you know, I wanted it to be that bit different. But for me, I just felt none of the romance, none of the longing. I just didn't really like the characters. So like I said, they go back and have this like sweet, passionate night, the first night they ever meet. And it's obviously very driven by lust. And then essentially it turns out he's basically kidnapped her into his labyrinth. And apparently he's drawn to people that are desperate. And she's desperate to be loved after being cheated on by her boyfriend. And so essentially he makes all these promises like, stay with me and I'll worship you, etc. Which does have sort of those original Labyrinth vibes. But then it turns out, well, I don't really feel anything anyway. I can't love you. So that's not what you're going to get from me. And it's like he basically just like kidnapped this woman and stuck her in this impossible situation. So right from the get-go, I just didn't really like him because obviously he can't love. So there's no love element here. It's all about lust. And also, I guess, his loneliness because he's like trapped in this Labyrinth, but it doesn't make it very clear because like he definitely feels some kind of emotions because he has a personality, but supposedly he can't feel emotion because he doesn't have a heart. So I would say I see more influence from Beauty and the Beast because he's obviously sort of messed up. He's had a curse on him and he can't love. But the difference with Beauty and the Beast is the Beast is just sort of a selfish person and he has to learn to let go and start caring for others, whereas this guy literally can't because he doesn't have a heart. Now, when Nell goes to do these tasks in the labyrinth, every time she succeeds in helping someone finish the labyrinth, he then gains back an emotion. So, for example, at one point, he suddenly gains back empathy. So he starts to be able to feel things, but this is a very slow process in the book, and he never actually gets back love while she's helping these, so I just never feel that connection with them. And honestly, the book for me is just way too cyclical. It's literally sexy scene with our protagonists, labyrinth task. Sexy scene with our protagonists, labyrinth. You know, it just kind of goes back and forth and it just kind of very repetitive and very slow. And also, something really gave me the ick. And I don't get the ick easily. But our Jareth-inspired character, Enver, he calls Nell my little lover. And I don't mean just once or twice. I literally mean on nearly every page they are together, he consistently, constantly refers to her as my little lover. And I don't know why, but I just don't like it. But sometimes he does seem to care for her, but we know he doesn't have a heart. So, you know, it's kind of like false almost. And she'll sort of fall for it. They'll have fun together, you know, in bed. And then all of a sudden they'll argue again and she's like, no, I must finish the labyrinth. And it just kept going on like that. And I just didn't really feel a connection between them. I feel like what makes Labyrinth so great for me is that kind of forbidden love element with that kind of longing and yearning. And now obviously I do realise that in Labyrinth, the girl's 15. We don't want anything happening there. So I'm happy for like these stories to be a bit more adult, make the characters older. I love that actually. But I still want this kind of yearning and longing and I see these like characters develop these kind of emotions for each other rather than, oh, we sleep together and now, you know, our female protagonist is kind of hooked to this guy who can't even love. So yeah, for me, this book just completely sort of misses the emotions that I feel from Labyrinth. And while, yes, I wouldn't mind a more sort of adult version that I can connect to more, even at this age. I mean, I still love the original, obviously. I just wasn't getting that. I didn't like these characters. I didn't feel any attraction to Enver, whereas like, you know, I love Jareth. So for me, it just really missed the mark. So I've decided to give this a 2.5 star rating because I will say I think Jordan Lynde can write a good sort of spicy scene quite well. But for me, because I wasn't feeling the characters, I just don't really care for it. Like I like a good spicy scene, but I need to feel that connection and really want my characters to be experiencing each other. Whereas I kind of wanted Nell to just wake up and be like, this guy kidnapped me. I shouldn't be doing this. I need to get out of here. You know, but it kind of was yo-yoing about all the time and she kept changing her mind and it was just annoying. So yeah, 2.5 for concept. It did have a little bit of like Labyrinth inspired scenes. There was like a ball scene, but again, it's not like as magical as Labyrinth. It, for me, was just kind of there because it refers to Labyrinth and also our main character had an obsession with peaches. Yeah, Enver loved peaches, which obviously is a direct sort of take from Labyrinth with Jareth and the peach, but it just felt like these little bits were thrown in there rather than really thought out or made to be the character's own. A 2.5 star rating because I don't think it's like really badly written, minus the my little lover repetition. And maybe if I had come into this novel not expecting it to be anything like The Labyrinth, I think if this hadn't have been named this and marketed as Labyrinth meets Beauty and the Beast, maybe I'd look upon it a little bit more favourably because I wouldn't be expecting it to have the vibes of Labyrinth so much, whereas I think this really misses the mark, honestly. So I am aware that my rating and judgment on this book, because I was expecting something and got something else, maybe that little bit harsher. Maybe if I read it differently, I would like it a bit more. However, I still think I would just feel the lust over love and not really connect. I'm more of a slow burn romance girl, I'm not gonna lie. I honestly think if this was executed differently, the actual concept's really clever and I think Jordan Lynde had a great idea. It just wasn't executed the right way for me. So this is our first book to see if we can get that Jareth energy, Labyrinth feeling, which I'm gonna say no for this one. So I'm going to move on to reading the next one, and I will be back with a review of that so we can sort of compare. And then right at the end, we'll see which is closest, which vibes and tropes and etc. they all take. But like I said, for this, like, it didn't get any sort of forbidden love, like desire, really. Like, it was all very false feeling. So yeah, I am feeling a little deflated, if I'm honest, because I really did expect to love this book, and I am really disappointed that I don't. But onwards and upwards, hopefully I like the next one more, because, you know, I will try and rate it a little bit like, this is the book, this is it compared to Labyrinth, to try not to like write everything off. But I just want something that gives me as much happiness as Labyrinth does. So, well, everyone, I'm back. Different day. I honestly thought I was going to finish this book yesterday and record all of this yesterday, but I ended up having a crazy busy day and then getting a migraine, so it didn't happen, sadly. However, I have now finished our second read, and I'll be honest, I didn't love this one either. But I will say it's for kind of different reasons to the other one, and I actually think this one has a lot of potential. And I apologise if the lighting isn't great. I need to buy lighting for this side of the room because it's just so much easier if I can just sit on my couch and be comfy while I talk to you, but the lighting is better over the other side. However, I'm teaching soon, so I can't rearrange things right now. So let's start with a quick synopsis of this second read. So it was The Departed, a Labyrinth retelling by Sommer. It's essentially a short story. I think it was like 150 something pages, it said on my Kindle, but because of how it was like formatted, it was a lot shorter than that. Like, I would say it's probably more like 100 pages equivalent. So in this short story, we follow Kaya, who has had a very terrible upbringing, sort of like an abusive stepfather, not sexually, I don't believe, but just like mentally and physically abusive. Clearly, Kaya is having a lot of issues from this, and she wishes herself to just forget everything and not exist anymore. So I guess you could say suicide is a theme in this one, so do be aware of that. Like, it could be a little triggering. So Kaya looks into her mirror, makes this wish, and then suddenly finds herself in a labyrinth. Then while in this labyrinth, sort of past memories tend to come and haunt her, and she has to sort of almost face her fears so that she then ends up forgetting these memories. And here she meets the King of the Forgotten, who is our Jareth kind of character. And what I like here is there isn't like anything too immediate with those. Their relationship does grow throughout the story, and essentially it is her quest to go through this version of a labyrinth. Honestly, I can't say much more than that, because being a short story, there isn't a lot more to it without me just like giving the whole entire plot away. And obviously I do want to leave this like really spoiler free so that you can experience these books if you wish yourselves. So let me just come out and say I'm also going to give this a 2.5-star rating. I'm going to start with the positives here, because I actually think the whole concept of the King of the Forgotten and why she ended up in this labyrinth and what it all sort of ended up being about was really good. I think if this book was revised and extended into a full novel, it could have really, really good potential. Right now, it feels a little bit rushed and vague because it's such a short story that I feel like none of the scenes lasted very long, and it just felt like we were rushing through, and I never really got to create a picture of all this in my mind or connect to the characters enough. And while I respect this is just like a indie author, self-published little story, there is a lot of typos in there, and I just think it could do with a lot of refinement. And if it had that, honestly, the concept is really clever, really good, and really interesting. Like, different enough from the original Labyrinth that it doesn't feel like a copycat, but that it has enough of that influence in there that I could feel that if this was done correctly, I would get those sort of vibes and really enjoy the story. Because it was so short, I just felt like I couldn't fully get into it. It felt like a little bit abstract, and also how she just ended up in a labyrinth and recognized that it was a labyrinth. There was no like, oh, where am I? Like, I'm in a different place. It didn't feel like that. It was just a little bit like she just went with it way too easily. However, like I said, I liked that the relationship between our characters didn't just appear completely out of nowhere, but it did develop a little bit at an uneven pace. There is a little spice in this one too, just like the other novel, but it's a lot less in this and it's much more towards the end. So I felt a little bit more okay with it, even though I don't think it's written as well. So what I will say, there was a tiny bit of a like ballroom type-esque scene that existed in there. So that was taken from it. And then obviously the concept of Labyrinth was in there. It was just a different version, which I appreciate. Like, I don't want these to be copycats. I want something that makes me feel like I'm in something similar. So would I recommend this one? Overall, no, but I really hope that the writer goes back, revises this, and turns it into a full novel, just like the other novel I read. Because I do feel like this one, if it was revised and extended and maybe had someone definitely helping with all like the proofreading stuff, I do think this has really good potential. But in its current state, I don't fully recommend it. But because it's short, it doesn't take much of your time. So if it intrigues you, I would definitely say go and read this one. I just feel like with the last one I read, it was over 500 pages, and I feel like I read that and just was like, oh, why did I go through this? So we've got to hope that third time's a charm, and that my last sort of inspired by Labyrinth book is good. And just a reminder, that is Fear Me, Love Me by Lilith Vincent, I believe. And it's definitely going to be a bit different. I know this is more like a mob mafia based book, but I'm really hoping that it somehow creates those vibes. I've got to say, I am not an expert in this sort of like dark romance mob sort of genre. I know it's a very popular genre, and I've been told many times by some people in my book club that I really need to start getting into these books. So I'm hoping it's going to take me by surprise and I'm really going to enjoy it, or at least, you know, enjoy it enough to say that it's decent. These other two have just let me down more in the way it was executed than the stories themselves. But I'm hoping that this one, you know, even though it's definitely, I think, sounds the most different in the way the plot's set up, I'm hoping that it creates its own feeling, but I can sort of get that love for the characters that I have, just like in the Labyrinth. So I guess we will see. I will come back and speak to you about the third book once I've read it, and then we'll sort of do a little comparison, maybe see exactly which ones took things from Labyrinth, which ones I feel like are most similar. And there are a lot of books I haven't included in this video, I've got to say. There was quite a few when I googled books that have been inspired by Labyrinth, and I just picked the ones that sounded like most like it, like the titles sort of vibed with, you know, Labyrinth. So there are others. So if you've enjoyed this and we just end up with a load of disappointing reads, I am willing to do this again if people ask me to and want me to, because I know not everyone following me probably loves Labyrinth, but if you are a Labyrinth fan and you would like me to explore some other options, I'm definitely down for trying. But for now, let me love you and leave you, and I will be back to speak about the other book once I have finished. Okay everyone, I'm back, and I've finished the third book that I read, which was Love Me, Leave Me by Lilith Vincent. I will display it because I read it on my Kindle, but I didn't like this one either. So before I get into my overall disappointment, let's talk about this book and why it didn't work for me. So let me quickly sum up the story. Basically what we find out in this book is we have a dual point of view, and we follow a 19-year-old called Vivian and a 34-year-old called Tyrant. Tyrant is like the local villain, and Vivian is just a local college girl. And we find out Vivian's father owes Tyrant money, and Tyrant steals her baby half-brother. Vivian's brave and she goes to try and get the baby back. There's a bit of a labyrinth situation to like get to the baby and through his house. And then essentially as she's taking on this labyrinth, he starts to fall for her. So fundamentally, it actually sounds the most like Labyrinth. And when I think of the actual concepts, I would say yes, it probably is, but I think I actually ended up liking it the least. So the way this book plays out is it is not in chronological order. So we actually start right with a scene with our female main character. Our male main character turns up very soon, and it's obvious they already know each other in this situation. It kind of feels like you're missing something and you kind of just dive right into the middle of the story, and there is quite quickly some sexual spicy things that go on. And what I will say is right away, to me, it starts with forced sexual activity. The triggers of this book, which there are many listed in the front, list it as forced breeding. Now, I can say I have never read a book like that, although I'm quite open to spice and I've read quite a few spicy romance novels in my time. This was another level of unhinged, and I have learned that I definitely do not like forced breeding. Like honestly, the book starts with rape in my opinion, and therefore I could never see past that. So no matter moments where maybe our male main character seemed very caring for our female main character, I just couldn't get over that, and I just saw him as very, very twisted and manipulative. And honestly, if I'm looking at it as like a perspective of being based on a labyrinth, that's not Jareth for me. I think for some people this could work. I think that if people are really into their unhinged dark romance, I think I'm not. I can read a dark romance, but not when it's this unhinged. I do think if you're a reader that really likes that genre, you could really like this. But for me, it just doesn't give Jareth energy. Yes, Jareth is cruel, but he is also the fantasy of a young girl. You know, Labyrinth is a dream. And while I see him as, yes, a little cruel and manipulative, I don't see him as a rapist who's forcing his baby into a belly of someone else. It goes way too far and it gives me the ick, honestly. So Tyrant, our main male character, keeps talking about how he wants to see her belly swell with his baby. And I just, no. This is the second book that has given me the ick. And like I said, I do not get the ick easily. Like, I just don't. Yeah, but this book, this did give it to me just when he kept talking about that. So obviously, if you don't like spice in your books, this definitely isn't for you. And I think even if you do, if you're looking for more of a romantic connection with your spice, like I think I always look for, this is also not going to be for you. Honestly, the whole time I read this book, I just wanted our female main character to get help. And the main male character, really. Like, they're both very twisted people that have gone through a lot, and that's why they connect. But I think they do need some kind of like help, and not from each other. And I just kind of rooted for her to get away from everyone in her life. Everyone was so negative, and I just want her to have like a fresh start and not with him. But our writer, Lilith Vincent, does say that this was completely inspired by her sort of love of Jareth, but I think she's known for writing these very dark, twisted romance novels, because I think for me, I've read some good dark romance, but I can deal with dark, but maybe not like, honestly, what I view as kind of pure evil. I think when there's a line like sexual assault, etc., it just goes too far for me. Like, a lot of the time when I've read very, spice heavy novels, it's at least always been consensual. But yeah, I feel like that's all I can really say. Like, I wouldn't say this book triggered me because I don't really get affected by things, honestly, but I'm like, it's just not what I want. Like, I was looking for the perfect Jareth to fall in love with, like that guy that isn't perfect, but he's redeemable, and that's just not what I got really on any of these, especially this one. So let's do a little overall summary of which ones had the most similarity to Labyrinth, what they're missing from me, and what I would actually look for in a novel, because obviously they have all missed their mark. And I am really sad that I'm kind of finishing the books here, but I need to take a break from this now. I do. But maybe a part 2 is in order, where I give some others a try and hope that I find something better. So our first one, Until the World Falls Down by Lynde. For me, yes, because it's Beauty and the Beast crossed with Labyrinth, isn't as similar, but I like that it had sort of like a very unique labyrinth concept. I did like that. But again, for me, the character just wasn't very lovable because he didn't have a heart, and we're told, oh yeah, he can't love. It just made it awkward for me. Like, I didn't gain that love for him because he essentially just kidnaps our female main character. And the way it plays out in Labyrinth is he takes the baby because she wishes for it to happen. Sarah wishes that someone will take Toby, and he thinks he's doing something good to help her, right? And I think he kind of knows deep down that, it's a bit twisted and he likes playing games, but it's not complete pure malice there. And he done something on her will. The difference with Lynde's book and Lilith Vincent's books is our female main characters are subjected to things against their will. It's very different, in my opinion. In Lynde's book, there is no stolen baby, but like I said, I'm not looking for a carbon copy, so I didn't really need that. But for me, it was just too cyclical on the way the story played out, and I just didn't feel myself like caring for the characters. Then The Departed by Sommer, if I'm honest, is probably my favourite one, even though I haven't given it a good rating, just because I do think it has so much potential there. It's just it wasn't written well and it wasn't in enough detail. Again, not focused on the stealing of a baby, but it is focused around the idea of wishes. So, in Labyrinth, Sarah wished for Toby to be taken away. In this book, our characters wishing to forget everything and just not exist anymore. So there is some similarity there, and I think there could be more Jareth vibes, but because it's so vague in this book and so short, I just never really connected either. And then obviously, like I said, Lilith Vincent's book, Fear Me, Love Me, definitely covers the Labyrinth storyline a little bit closer with the idea of a stolen baby and it is her half-brother and everything, but maybe it was just too close with that aspect and then missed by a mile on the sort of romantic possibility that the book could have. Because like I said, in actual Labyrinth, obviously the girl's underage, so you don't want anything to actually happen. So having a more adult version with older characters would be great. And she has focused in on this like age gap thing, and she is legal now. And I don't really mind age gaps if it's written well and it makes sense kind of why it happens. But he is such a predator in this book that I just can't see that. Like, he just does come across, you know, as a bit of a pervert because of the age gap especially, but just in how he acts. So ultimately, I just think the main reason they all fail for me is they just fail on the romance. Like, I'm looking for a slightly twisted guy that's redeemable and we feel this romance, and I didn't get that from any of them. And another thing they all are really missing, in my opinion, from Labyrinth and the vibe of Labyrinth in general is side characters. I feel like Labyrinth just has so many great side characters, you know, with Hoggle, with Ludo, and everyone else, that I just think these all lack that. Like, there was no other characters that were that prevalent or that I really cared about. And I think I just have such a love for the original Labyrinth side characters. I would have liked to see some friendships grow and stuff within the stories, which I just didn't get at all. So yeah, like I said, a little disappointed. Like, I was really hoping to love all of these books because of how much I love Labyrinth, and all the authors, you know, explicitly say that they are inspired by Labyrinth here, but I just don't feel it. Yes, there are some obvious things, Peaches, babies getting stolen, and actual Labyrinth concepts, but I just don't think they really captured anything to do with the essence of the book. It was just features that were borrowed to create, you know, completely different and slightly unhinged stories, honestly. But if you have read any of these, especially if you have differing opinions to me, please do let me know in the comments below, because I am really interested to hear. And I know mine is only of an opinion. Some people might love these, so I'm not saying do not go and read them. If you're a fan of Labyrinth, maybe give them a try and just see what you think. And maybe you just see Labyrinth in a very different way from me. I was only 3 years old when I first saw it, and I just remember it just being really magical, especially with like the ballroom scene. And you know, as I've got older, I've obviously recognised there are some very twisted elements to the story and very dark elements to the story, but I think essentially it still is just like a dream world, you know, and that's how I've always seen it for me. And maybe that's just because of how young I was when I first saw it, that's what I want to get out of like a retelling now. But if you have just enjoyed me exploring some of these because you love Labyrinth just as much as me, and you want me to read a few more books and give my opinion and see if I can actually find something I really enjoy, let me know in the comments or message me, whatever, and I will see what I can do sometime in the near future. But anyway, I hope you've enjoyed this video, even though it's been a bit of a letdown for me, and honestly probably one of my most slow, disappointing weeks of reading ever. And what doesn't help is I've started a like self-help book to read alongside these because I was just feeling a bit with these, and honestly I'm not really enjoying that either. So it's just been a weird week of reading. But anyway, I'm going to stop talking now because I could dwell on the disappointment that I'm feeling for a long time, and I will just look forward to recording and making something new and reading some good books, because I'm going to move on to Crescent City now and start that, and I'm sure that is going to redeem reading for me completely. So yeah, I will see you again real soon. Bye!